thanks everyone for spending your time today with us. I know everyone's schedule is busy. What we wanted to talk to today is talking about demystifying next generation networks. In 2023, obviously, cyber many, and we want to talk about the technology and where we're at in the industry and tools that can help us streamline and become more effective reducing risk for our organizations. So I'm going to let Sarah lead us through the intro, and we'll start after that. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Worsey, and I am the marketing manager here at Sentia. So before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. So all attendees are automatically muted, but if you do have a question that you wish to pose verbally, you could hit the raise hand button at the top of your screen and we will address you and you can unmute your mic and pose your question then. Or if you choose to, you can just share your question in the chat window and we will address it at the end. So as Steve reiterated, in today's digital work from anywhere era, the most important aspect of any network solution boils down to security. And there have been many advances in modern security architecture with the introduction of zero trust technology and secure access service edge, better known as SASE. So today's session is about simplifying these technologies to gain a better understanding of how they work and how they can benefit your organization. So before we get started, we are going to go over a quick overview of the agenda. So we will kick off the session with a brief overview of Sentia and our speaker, Steve Nowicki, and then we'll talk about the current industry challenges and trends, take a deeper dive into ZTNA and SASE, and close off the session with a call to action and some Q&A. So thank you for that. Next slide, please, Steve. So again, I'm sure most of us are very familiar with Sentia on the call, but it doesn't hurt to have a quick recap nonetheless of who we are and what we do. So we are a Canadian-based managed IT solutions provider, and we've been in operation for over 16 years, and we are based in Richmond Hill, Ontario. We work with businesses of all sizes and a wide range of industries, including finance, manufacturing, insurance, and higher ed, just to name a few. And we are backed by a very strong team of subject matter experts in a wide variety of solution areas. We also have a strong presence in the Caribbean and cater to a number of industries there as well. So next slide, please. Thank you. So with that said, I'd like to now give a quick intro to today's speaker. So Steve Nowicki is our network practice lead at Sentia, and he comes with over 30 years of industry experience designing and managing complex network environments for customers locally and on an international scale. He has many accreditations to his name, including being an architect in Zero Trust Network Access Solutions, and he dedicates his time to helping customers maximize the value and security of their solutions while aligning to their budgets and business goals. So kept it short and sweet, thank you. And with that said, we are going to get going with the session, and we are going to start off with a quick poll. So just give me one moment, please. And here we go. We're going to launch our first poll. Once you're able to see it, please share your answer and hit submit, and we will discuss the results.
Okay, here we go.
Steve, over to you.
Bit of a trick question. The reality is the average time, hackers stay in your network varies, but in a lot of cases, the average time before attackers are detected is something in the range of 200 plus days. Now, the reality is it may vary. Attackers have specific goals when they get in their networks. So, the average time, before from, original penetration to, monetization, can be as short as, 5 to 8 days. So it's not that there's an exact number, but really one of the key foundational elements that we're discussing is we can no longer assume that our networks are secure, and we have to protect from within as well as from without. And thank you, Sarah. So with that, I'm going to move in to the next question. So why should businesses enhance their network and IT architecture? So this slide, I took an excerpt from the National Cyber Threat Assessment from Canada. Sorry, let me move back. I was going to try and copy that into the chat, but we can extend this link to everyone after the chat. But this was an excerpt from the table of contents. Hybrid work and work from anywhere broadens the threat surface for individuals and organizations, and I think that's common. Whether it was a lot of it was driven by COVID, but not expressly from COVID. A lot of organizations were going to hybrid models and depending upon the business models. I mean, cybercrime represents a significant threat to Canada. And one of the things, if you read through this article and you see it's not, it's not, oh, I'm too small of a customer, they don't care. There's ability, to monetize every customer. And, from, the cyber criminals perspective, each business represents an opportunity. Obviously, in our current framework, the geopolitical competition in cyberspace puts everyone at risk. And that's a statement about, there are, wars going on, and the economic wars that become cybersecurity is something that's ever present right now. And then obviously the cyber criminals will continue to adapt their methods to maximize profit. So, and, you know, not only is it like individual organizations and small enough organizations, but there's a lot of state sponsorship of, providing, tools and capabilities. And then cyber criminals target critical infrastructure. That's obviously a case. And all of us being in IT, we read the media, we get, blogs sent to us regularly about, the latest attack, and that's every week, if not more frequent. So we all know it's happening. And then so the question becomes ourselves as IT, professionals, how do we reduce the risk to our business? And that's really, what we're talking about today. So if we start getting into specifically, we're going to talk about the network and we're going to talk about IT's network challenges is, you know, we mentioned before, the industry must assume that hackers are inside your network. From, the IBM data breach report, 4.4 million is the average cost of a data breach, which, is a combination of reputation, combination of lost productivity, combination of potentially, paying and, providing, you know, you know, also, the cost to restore and the outage to the business. Generally, the faster it's detected, the lower the cost. So part of, when we talk about risk is we can't stop something from happening, per se. The sophistication is there that, a lot of people say it's not about, if, it's about when. But what we can do defensively is we can understand when things happen and when there's, vulnerable assets within the organization. And the whole idea of what we're talking about is, what are the tools that we can do that so we can minimize the risk and, be on top of it very quickly. So, one of the pieces that we talk about is implicit trust with perimeter defenses only is no longer an effective means of protecting enterprise assets. And I think, we all understand that. I won't dwell on that point. But at the same time, making changes to network security approach and an organization's cybersecurity philosophy can be difficult. It really, and we'll talk about it in some of the later slides, but it's really a top-down approach. Everyone has to understand that security is about everything. This presentation focuses on the network, side specifically, and I'll dive deep down, but not expressly. Security is about everything within the stack. It's about securing all your weakest points, and we'll talk about that with the attack surface shortly. And then, some of, what, IT is faced with is you have existing technology, but when I talk about investments in static protections, it's protections that are set and, tune, not necessarily dynamic. Dynamic protections go a little bit further. That's where, when you're talking about like cybersecurity mesh architecture, where components work together, interactively. If they sense something, they have ways, to automatically respond, automatically quarantine, etc. So this becomes the challenge because with some organizations it's maybe more about tuning. They've made the right investments and it's about tuning and adding capability. For other organizations it could be about you're not necessarily on the right platform, and then you have to get a roadmap to get on the right platform. um, and fundamentally, I talked a bit before about attack surface, but digital transformation and workforce transformation, it's changed where the application data and users reside. The majority of organizations have, some form of hybrid cloud, on-premise data center, cloud data center, SaaS applications, and users are, as we said before, not always working in the office, but they can be working from everywhere. So these are the challenges that we face. And I just wanted to, before I get to the next slide, we'll move into a poll and then we'll move on to the next slide where we, start talking about the solutions.
Thank you, Steve. Just give me one moment here while I get this loaded up. Okay. Here we go.
All right, thank you. Well, I guess from a response perspective, the majority of organizations are doing that. There may be a few organizations tied to manufacturing that have more of a presence in office, but even those organizations usually have some resources and some ability to work remotely. Thank you for that. So when we come to the challenge, how does IT overcome the challenges? Effectively, affordably, and at the same time, you have to ensure that the business and user experience disruption is kept at a minimum. We've established that obviously that there's a roadmap of what needs to happen, but at this point, we want to reduce risk. So if we step back a little bit and talk about what the industry has done to, help organizations, protect their assets, it's, there's really three main components that we want to address in this discussion. And, it's about, there's a few organizations. If we talk about the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, they had a document SP 800-207, and I can provide that information talking about, zero trust architecture. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, created, a document and recently published this year zero trust maturity models, which the idea was to talk about, we said this is a journey, it's a roadmap. Businesses can't stop, because, there's a requirement to enhance securities, but, it's about creating an incremental approach to reducing risk. And how the industry responded is the industry responded with creating, solutions like Secure Access Service Edge or SASE. And, that started in 2019 when Gartner created a trend. But really what that's about and what I want to talk about, today is explain how it evolved, why it can be valuable to organizations, and it can assist organizations in achieving zero trust network access. But the foundation and the framework is about zero trust, and SASE becomes enabler that is a fit for some organizations. We also will talk a little bit later in the presentation about if it is a fit for your organization and the typical organizations that find that more effective. So if we talk about the building blocks of zero trust access, at the foundation, we're talking about visibility and analytics. An organization needs to have logs to track events, look for artifacts to assist in cyber-related data analysis and forensics. And, as we talked about, before, and I talked on the previous slide, digital transformation adds challenges to that because there's a lot of different clouds, there's different tools. On-premise does this, a SaaS vendor does that, your cloud premise, and some people have multi-clouds, each have their own set of tools. So the challenge and still a requirement is to bring visibility and analytics together for the business. Um, some of the stuff we talk about, static versus dynamic, is really about automation and orchestration. Um, you know, even, large and small of our environments, but especially as environments get more complex and you have more points of touch, wanting to, create static user configured devices to assume across an enterprise that you can ensure that everything is configured perfectly and properly all the time is, it's not practical. And, when you look at weakest link with security, the weakest link can sometimes be an exposure. But, part of what automation and orchestration offers is two benefits. Like one is it can get consistent configuration experience, but it also, creates the advantage of having some dynamic controls where things happen automatically, infected host, quarantine. It's you have a problem or a higher risk score on something, or someone connecting, you now have the ability to make decisions, automatically because, obviously IT staffs can't be looking at everything. Not to talk specifically, but industry skills gap. We know that IT resources and the expense to business is high and that there's a lot of responsibilities. So that's where, tools and capabilities of your solution have to help. They have to make it easier. And then, every organization, has to deal with governance and that's about, putting IT and business together. And that's kind of what our jobs are. We have reporting that we have to do on governance. We have compliance that is a requirement of our organizations. And obviously we need to have the security. So, this creates, to me, this is creating the foundation of what, what is IT's challenge, but it's also, what we have to do and what we have to ensure that our solutions do, and we have to ensure that our environment does. Now, another, key foundational piece we talk about is implicit trust is gone. We're now in a never trust, always verify. And, that's a requirement. We need to know that, devices, that have not been compromised, we have to check that they've not been compromised. And this is an ongoing process. It's not a, validate, or it's not just, oh, I trust your credential, I'm allowing you in. It has to be a lot more than that. And least privilege is another foundational piece. It's also, when you want to reduce the risk, and, we've known about least privilege for a long time. It's difficult to implement, it's difficult to manage in some cases because, you give out privilege to someone, and especially in larger organizations, they change jobs functions. Now their privilege is moving with them. Um, the reality when we talk about the, a MITRE ATT&CK framework or any type of security framework is privilege escalation is a big part of attacks. They can get in a network, they try and get in with anyone. Phishing email is still a very popular approach. Now, once they get on a workstation, it may not have a lot of capability or rights, or doesn't, have the ability to get into a min. So it's all about privilege escalation. So if you make it very, difficult to do the privilege escalation and you give people minimum access and rights just to their job, you are essentially just reducing your risk. And that's what it's about. So talking a little bit about, the pillars of IT and what we're responsible for is fundamentally, let's start with data. It is about protecting data. Organizations run on data. That's IT's mission. Data is used in every way. So that's really a foundational piece. Identity is important, and identity is, it's not just it's not just a user, but an identity can be a device, it can be, a location. There's a lot of things to tie in to identity, and we'll get into that a bit. Obviously the network is the foundation. Let's call it, the glue, the transport, the communication that allows users to access applications, and that has to be part of the zero trust access. application and workload, equally important. I mean, that's the front end to your data. Um, One of the biggest challenges we find when we're working with customers and going, on the zero trust journey is application workflow. It's, what apps are where, who accesses what. It's, a lot, some organizations don't track that well. And that's one of the first discovery pieces that we'll get into a little bit later. But that's one of the first discovery pieces that's important is to know what you need to protect and know what access you need to give to users. Um, and finally, the devices represent, what we're connecting from, and more often than not, IT has a lot of demands. It's not always corporate devices. There's BYOD devices, personal devices, devices from home, and it's, how do you ensure that you can, secure the world, especially when you have less control over these devices? So drilling in a little bit, zero trust access on data is continuous inventory. You have to know your data. You have to know where it is. You have to know the state of it. Data loss prevention, ensuring, that its use is, proper use, and obviously encryption, encryption at rest. And these are the things to focus on the data block. When we talk about identity, it's about being enterprise wide. We obviously need to consider user and devices, and we need continuous validation and risk analysis. And those represent two pieces. Continuous validation with the ZTNA has the ability, and I'm going to talk about that shortly, of um, being able to sever a connection once you agree that, whether it's a risk or you agree that there's something off on that endpoint, you have that ability, to control that. And obviously, when we talk about organizations, it's about multi-factor authentication, but it's also, about considering leveraging SAML or some other type of technology to bring identity together. Because, we talked about minimal disruption to end users. And so obviously the solution that you're putting in has to be something that, the user experience does not suffer for it. When we, moving to the network, the first point we talk about is when we go to zero trust, you do need micro perimeters. And by that, you need control points that you can, control access. Because, as we talk, that perimeter security isn't enough. In order to do zero trust, you do have to have separation, from clients, from workload, and things like that. So you have enforcement points, and I'm going to show what that looks like graphically later in this presentation. Um, Micro segmentation, within the data center is also important. Just in time and just enough connectivity. That's really about least privilege. And obviously, we need encryption as much as we can have across, the board, obviously across public networks, but even on private networks, there's a benefit to encryption because if you're assuming people are in the network and they may gain access to things, you want to encrypt end to end where you can. Moving to application and workload, we have, continual access validation, and that's at the application level as well as the network. Real-time risk analysis. Once again, we're talking about dynamic controls here. Real-time behavioral analysis, and that's about controls of who's connecting, when, where. Did they just connect in Canada and an hour later connect in, Europe? There's, opportunities and intelligence that can help, you know, mitigate, cyber threats or people who have, stolen identities. And then obviously, within the application and workload is the threat protection framework, and that could be anything from WAFs to application specific security controls. And then when we talk about devices, part of it is, is simple and complex as continuous inventory. So it's important that you know what you have, you know what you allow to connect, you know what's current, so that you can recognize an endpoint and be sure. Some of that continuous inventory, and I mean when we get into it, is certificate inventory is also important. What certificates are current, what need to be revoked, and have that life cycle built. Data loss prevention, another key piece. Encryption, data categorization. If you're distributing. In some cases, there is, data that does reside on the endpoint. So that has to be understood in the organization, similar to the first pillar we mentioned. Um, just enough access, and, threat management as well on the devices. And, if we're to look at it, part of it is XDR, but part of it is XDR capability on the client that can also integrate to your ZTNA capability. And, truth be said, even industry solutions are evolving, and not every industry solution out there has all these capabilities. And this is a challenge, but like we say, it is a journey. We work with customers, day in and day out to help them prioritize, reducing the risk and moving down through those perspectives. So I'm going to pause here for a second. Does anyone want to ask any questions? Okay, thanks. I will continue on. So, um, graphically, I wanted to show, the evolution of networks to zero trust. And it's kind of, this is what they traditionally were for remote access, and this is what zero trust looks like. So we're starting with the network. Now, networks can exist, private DCs, they could be in cloud, AWS or Azure. We have our user, and our user can have multiple devices or different devices. They can be owned by the organization, or they can be, personally provided BYOD devices. Now, where the user connects to could be corporate office, could be home, factory, coffee shop. There's, we've already defined, and I think even from our poll, understood that all organizations are facing these same use cases. So, traditionally, perimeter firewall, and you had a VPN, IPsec, or SSL, and if the user was behind another corporate site or another office, often you have a site-to-site VPN in place. But if a user was remote, it would be a dial-up type of or point-to-site VPN, with IPsec or SSL. So this is the traditional perimeter defenses. There was an ability to do some least privilege here. So, an effective solution, different user groups with just, the necessary access. But once they came in, there's not necessarily a lot of way to reduce east-west travel within the organization. So when we talk about zero trust network access, then is we're talking about having a policy enforcement point. And this is we're starting to get into a little bit of software defined networking capability depending. Now, the policy enforcement point was really, it's a proxy. It uses TLS as the termination. It can be in the cloud, it can be a hardware appliance, or there's some vendors that also do it as a software agent, where they do the orchestration through cloud, and then the control plane, is it within the software agent. So the industry, there's not one approach to the industry. It does become confusing because, and this is even part of the reason for the discussion. A lot of vendors come and use different terminology to talk about a different way they do it, or they may even say the same stuff. Zero trust network access, where they only have one tenant. So it's important as you solution these things that you understand, the approach, you understand the value. There's no one size fits all, but there are some vendors out there that do have leading solutions. So, um, one of the, there is agent and agentless approaches for the user, but the most benefit, and when you can, is the most capabilities when you have an agent installed on the end user. So, now when we talk about, you're trying to connect to a network, data center, cloud, doesn't matter where it is, but, for cloud providers, they're going to put in a proxy type of device that will talk to the policy enforcement point in the cloud. For some vendors that integrate it into hardware or hardware appliances, this proxy slash firewall, is the same device as the policy enforcement point. And then when it's software, like for the software agent-based solutions for zero trust network access, it's everything's, done, from, device to device. So the policy enforcement points are, at the device level, and then you have a overlay of control that decides, what will allow sessions, to go on. And in a lot of cases, the communication is you have the agent to policy enforcement point, and you have, policy enforcement point to the proxy firewall, whatever is servicing the edge or the software agent. And what this provides is the capability to now control, and we're talking about continual verification. You have something intelligent in the conversation, so it has the ability to block communication dynamically if you hit the rule sets that suggest that should be the case. Now, obviously, one of the basis of this solution that we talk about is you need an identity service, and some of the common is to leverage SAML with your identity provider, LDAP, or identity and access management solutions. So when you're looking at that, like anything, you want the user experience to be as streamlined as possible. So you need to have an integrated identity service. So now that we're talking about that, the capability for ZTNA and what this has to do is continuous verification. Um, and I make a term here that I put in conditional access plus, and that's really about, it can be state of a client risk, whether, software is patched, antivirus running, and some of those conditional access used to exist. It can be time of day, it can be location. You have ability to, build in, custom things um, into the PC that you can create dynamically to say it has to be there to allow to connect, so that if someone were, as an example, to somehow compromise an end user certificate, there's more than that. And then you have the dynamic nature that you want to build it. So we also need the least privilege um, capability. And, we talked about that is we still want to give just enough access. So, and I bring that up multiple times in the slide. This is one of the bigger challenges that organizations face because they don't necessarily have a great view of what their privilege model is now. And then we talk about inspection at the app layer, which for the OSI model is layer 7. And that's in order to do that with encrypted traffic, the recommendation is to do deep packet inspection, encrypt, decrypt. Deep packet inspection does take horsepower, so that it's important to have the solution. And when you're assessing the solutions and evaluating, it's also important to understand that these level of security controls are there, because otherwise, your conditional access and assessing the risk, you don't have the same level of visibility. Okay, so now we get to the question of, and we've talked about it, how do we deliver these capabilities um, when you have a diverse enterprise? You have one or multiple clouds, you have SaaS applications, and geographically distributed workforce. And what I talked about earlier is, there's a lot of different tools within different clouds, different security, different logging, reporting, different, visibility, different automation. So it's, you say as network, well, you know, these systems aren't designed to necessarily work together and work perfectly and be synchronized. So the question, we kind of say is, it becomes a very daunting task. We all have, budgets that we have to manage. We all have, an overworked workforce, and, we have to be efficient. Um, so one of the things, and I guess we're talking through the challenge, which I've already talked to these points. And what we have to remember from zero trust access, last point here, is it's putting demands on, visibility and analytics, automation, orchestration, and governance. So, the next slide, I want to talk a little bit to, we talked about one of the things that the industry has done and one of the trends that's happening that's trying to be a solution to the diverse networks and the diverse user base that we have today. And that technology is SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. So really, it is a combination of network as a service and security as a service. Um, and then, obviously, zero trust access is the um, is the goal of every organization, but SASE becomes a technology that can help organizations manage that in the world of complexity. So just to summarize quickly, network as a service, it has SD-WAN, it can have WAN optimization, routing, content delivery. Security as a service has firewall as a service, secure web gateway for providing access to remote users, et cetera, to ensure that regardless of where a user is, your user experience, your firewall controls, your DNS filtering, DNS security, web filtering exists everywhere. And the reason that's important is because that reduces the risk, that reduces the chance of people going to sites or, you know, leveraging proxies or going to locations where malware lingers. CASB and cloud access security brokers. This is about providing the capability to restrict access to SaaS applications and to provide control. Obviously, within SaaS applications, you can manage it, but this is industry's attempt to centralize, the control and the visibility and the logs. Because, if you have, 3 or 4 SaaS applications, you can go into each of those individual SaaS applications and you can mine their logs, or you can, leverage CASB, which can be a combination of inline control or APIs to get that information, to get the governance, to get the control. So the idea is to streamline it so you start getting a central point of management. Data loss prevention doesn't need any introduction. It's obviously important that the data stays where it needs to be and only, for the necessary eyes. Um, Digital experience management is um, it's a new, well, I won't say it's 100% a new technology, but as I think COVID really drove the digital experience management as being an important thing because um, it's important to know that your users, regardless of where they're working, home, office, etc., have an effective user experience. That IT knows the effective user experience, and that you have tools and capabilities that you can understand and help troubleshoot. Because going to service desk and service desk having to deal with, is it the users Wi-Fi at home? Is it their internet link? Where are they connecting from? This provides a lot of capability and control. And then another interesting technology is remote browser isolation. This has the value proposition of depending trusted or untrusted hosts, or if there's, some browsing that you want to have, you know, that may be going to, sites that are questionable or not. It has the ability to, virtualize the screen, make it about screen scrapes down to the user and reduce the user's experience a little bit. Um, so like fundamentally, we talk about these capabilities, but the benefit is generally, SASE solutions from the industry, they're cloud delivered. And what is the benefit of cloud delivery? It's offering consolidation, logging, and reporting for all the connectivity, within a user's network, and it brings everything together. It allows them to have, the reporting that they need, ease of management, and centralized logging. So on the next slide, I wanted to talk about kind of show what um, SASE looks like. So if we talk about high level schematic, we're talking, we start with a cloud delivered service edge. Then you have your user connecting. Once again, your end user, they can be in, coffee shop, they can be at home, road warrior. I mean, they could be using mobile devices. You're also going to, bring in your corporate office, your factory, and part of the SD-WAN capability is you're bringing that in, to the cloud delivered edge. So, and there's multiple ways to do that, existing devices or purpose-built devices that are designed to be SD-WAN, SASE-based devices that have minimal capability and control and, provide, cost-effective options. So part of where the users want to connect to is they can be connecting to, cloud data centers, they can be connecting to private data centers, or they can be connecting to the internet for SaaS applications or the internet for web traffic. And the whole idea is the traffic is always flowing through this service edge. The controls exist in the service edge, and you have your ZTNA capabilities delivered in the service edge with agents and with proxy devices. I mean, microsegmentation still applies. I mean, you're going to build out controls and isolation within the data center. So moving on now, we say, when do we consider SASE within an organization? Um, because, we talked about before, firewall as a service, SD-WAN, et cetera. So, the capabilities of SASE can be provided by customers' existing infrastructure. So, when does when does, a move to SASE make sense? And I think, organizations have to say when the operational efficiencies and visibility gained by single vendor SASE is a significant cost reduction for an organization. And it's not always easy to determine what's the cost reduction because there is a cost to these solutions. There is some additional pieces, but when you look at the operational overhead to, prove compliance and governance and reporting and things like that, and right now a lot of organizations will use a lot of disparate tools. The success comes when you look at it, completely and understand if the benefit plus the reduced manpower, justifies, the outcome. Um, and that's, basically I just stole that point is, it's about streamlining network and security operations. That is definitely, a saving, and it does make work easier. Um, it doesn't necessarily make less work if an organization's not doing these things now, but if you're doing the compliance and the reporting, if you're, constantly looking at your security logs and things like that, and creating the ZTNA conditional access, or diverse networks, this will, this will promise ease of use for your operators. Um, Another, consideration is, if your existing infrastructure does not support ZTNA and you don't have a clear roadmap, and you're saying, okay, I'm at the point where I have to assess a new solution. We know we have these gaps. We know we have increased risk. So this is, when you have an opportunity to look at, are you going to do SASE only or ZTNA? And then companies that are, adopting cloud have a lot of SaaS workloads. That's another piece. Um, and then geographically diverse employees and offices can benefit from SASE WAN offload. Like one of the things we talk about on the SASE SD-WAN standpoint is, the main SASE vendors also build connectivity. Excuse me. And if you look at multinational organizations, they can have a benefit of leveraging SASE vendors' backbone to provide, enhanced access across the organization. As an example, if your SaaS apps may be hosted in Europe, and you need to, go from another region across, you can leverage those networks, and that exists within all the big providers. And then the final piece is, are you, do you want to go to an operational, per user operational price where you start changing? Okay, I want to change to a per user model. I, understand my costs instead of looking at my tools as a whole bunch of point products and an overall budget. You start looking at, consuming in a different way. And we all know that cloud consumption models are a little bit different, and they favor how some organizations are doing their finance. And I think that moves us into another poll. Sarah, if you don't mind posting that, please.
Sure thing. Just give me one moment here. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's encouraging news. It's moving. I know some people are already on the journey, and that's why I use the term journey, because it's incremental. You can't do everything at once. You can't flip the switch. I mean, there are occasionally we come across organizations that, may have, some out of date, and they need to make a move. And if you're in that position, moving to SASE can be a benefit. I mean, there's components of SASE like secure service edge, et cetera, that existed, for years, that addressed a use case of remote workers and securing them when they weren't at home, when a company didn't want to do, as an example, always on VPN or application-based control on split tunnels. So, um, you know, it depends within the organization. That's something that we continually and would love to help all our customers, kind of understand where they are and help them with strategy. I mean, that's part of, that's part of what we do, and that's the important job we can help with reducing risk and ensuring operational efficiencies where possible. Okay, so moving on, and we talked about ZTNA readiness, but these are some of the key things when we talk about, assessing where your organization is. And obviously, I talked a little bit about this before. It's top down. It's about organizational leadership and cyber cultural maturity. And, really to say is, where are we at with the organization? Is security is important? Does the organization have the necessary patience to understand the risk, but also, um, you know, to go that, extra mile and know that there's, a new technology and new projects that need to happen. And I think everyone's aware of the cyber climate. I think, I would almost say that there's not anyone, even from an end user perspective, that doesn't understand there's serious threats going on now. The next piece we talk about is knowledge of enterprise assets. As you are, assessing your ZTNA, and as you have to create the policies for ZTNA, you have to know, you know, where your data is, how you need to protect it, et cetera, because, your plan and your implementation strategy is only going to be as good as the amount of controls you have. Now, understanding we said it's incremental a lot of times with customers because of as the knowledge is being built, or sometimes customers don't have visibility into all their traffic flows, et cetera, is putting in this technology and the tools with visibility. It becomes incremental where you put it in, you improve the security, but it becomes something you do ongoing, where you continually improve the security, you continue to gain information, and isolate apps accordingly and do least privilege. I mean, an organization that has a lot of infrastructure and apps and things that haven't been under these controls, it's a mountain to climb. But as you start implementing it and as you onboard new applications and services, each time you onboard, if you onboard correctly, you're now going to have a lot more controls than you would have had before. The strength of the identity solutions is important as well. Like for ease of use, if you can consolidate and as much as possible have consistent identity solutions across all your services. Similar challenges now, but your SaaS applications, your cloud applications, on premise, it does make integration much easier. And then we talk a little bit about technology footprint. Um, you know, I think a lot of customers suggested they'd already started on this, but for the customers that aren't there, or have a specific technology footprint, one of the services we offer is to consult, to come in, have conversations, understand what you have, understand where your investments are, and try and create a strategy for you getting to where you need to be. And then, finally, and it kind of dovetails to the first point, but it's a commitment of stakeholders. It is a project. It is going to take time, within the organization. So it does um, need to be on the visibility of the whole organization. So when we talk about ZTNA implementation steps, and these are high level, we talk about defining your protect surface, and this is about knowing your enterprise assets. You need to know what you need to protect first and foremost, so that you can develop, um, you know, mapping your transaction flows so that you understand where the traffic is, what you need to protect, because as you're doing ZTNA, you're approving flows and you're approving traffic. Um, then the network can be architected. Then you're in a position to create the policies, and then monitoring and maintaining. And as we said, when we talk about monitor and maintain, it's not a set and forget. And unfortunately, those days are over. Um, so we're now in, we're living in a dynamic world, and that's where we talk a little bit about automation and orchestration can assist in that, as well as partnership with people that can help, because we understand that IT's mission is to serve their customers, which is the internal business users. Um, so this is, as we get near the end, we talk about key considerations when selecting a vendor or partner. And And I think one of the key points is, look at your business requirements and understand ZTNA, you know, or SASE and ZTNA make the most sense for your business. Like, where are you going? Where do you sit? Security should be integrated, not an afterthought. There's a lot of providers out there that weren't, traditional security providers that are starting to do ZTNA because they can provide an access and they can provide, some controls on, conditional. But what's really important is security has to be integrated as well. You have to be able to inspect the traffic at layer 7. You have to, there is benefits to, security organizations and their security resource, their security research search organizations. Easy for me to say. Let me grab some water. Because, they're constantly, there's new threats. There's, the idea and the benefit of some of these subscriptions is in real time, they're putting out, signatures or dynamic tool sets that help protect against specific attacks that they're seeing in the environments. Talked about L7 inspection, very important. SASE, I guess there's a little bit of a conversation of single vendor versus multi-vendor. So you got consolidation versus best of breed. I think, some of the benefits of SASE and by its very nature, it's fairly new in the industry, and the complexity of trying to integrate too many different products, I think you're going to lose some of the operational benefits. And then one of the things we talk about is it's important that who you work with has an understanding of the zero trust pillars, obviously knows where the market is, because there's a lot of, and part of the reason of this presentation is there's a lot of conversations and people throw around zero trust network and they throw out SASE, but no two solutions are the same, no two implementations are the same. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing, and because it's our business, is assessing, where the marketplace is, what the best solutions are, how certain solutions offer more value to different customers, and it is a customer by customer basis. There are some, what we consider, key contending solutions that are better fits depending upon the customer. And obviously, having the right methodologies, having experience working with customers to help map their transaction flows, et cetera, and work through the business is key, because it's not just about throwing up the technology, because the umbrella, all this technology is only as good as the effectiveness in which it's implemented. And the last call to action slide we talk about here is, what we're offering to our customers is, I'd be glad to, or one of the professionals in our team here would be glad to come out and understand where you are, understand some of your business pain points, look at your technologies and help develop a roadmap. So we're offering to assist in a discovery session, come out, understand what needs to be and see where it evolves to, right? So I think these technologies are definitely the future. With the challenges of compliance reporting, and the need for visibility across the organization, it's really what we're talking about is software defined networking coming to users and having those dynamic capabilities. So I talked almost too long, but I'll open the door now for questions if anyone wants to ask questions. And you know what? If you don't want to ask questions now, feel free to reach out and we can have separate questions, because I know in these shared environments sometimes, you know. What?
No, thanks, Stephen. I don't see anything in the chat or the Q&A. But yes, if anybody wants to pose a question, feel free to unmute your mic if that's a better way, or like Steve said, it can be taken offline.
Maybe I'll ask a quick question. Hey, Stephen.
Hello.
With a SASE solution, does it provide? So I know you mentioned stuff about segmentation as well, and I
Yes.
think specifically microsegmentation. Does a SASE solution provide microsegmentation endpoint to endpoint going to the server, or how does that kind of correlate to something like, um, a product maybe called Guardicore or Illumino, those type of technologies? How do they kind of correlate?
Um, Generally, you're going to want with your SASE solution, you're going to want a control point within the network or data center, and there's various ways to do it because there's different tech, like there is agent-based solutions where you install software agents and all the zero trust control is done at the software agents. Where some of the traditional firewall vendors would say is that they would have your traditional data center firewall and you'd be doing your microsegmentation at the firewall, and that's where you would put the controls in. And then there's some vendors that really, it's pretty broad and, they may say, well, I have a proxy here that goes to my data center, but if you're grouping everything in the data center to that one proxy, you're not really getting the level of microsegmentation. And I mean, it's an excellent question you ask. And the industry is evolving because, VMware stacks, as an example, VMware does microsegmentation well, and they have this technology, but you know, that's where we kind of work with understanding the workload and understanding the level of segmentation with customers to map it, because there's other pieces that, miss with vendors. And there is unfortunately no perfect solution out there right now. But, there are vendors that come much closer, to solving business challenges.
I'll look into it more. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I mean, feel free to reach out and we can have a further discussion, look at your architecture and understand what it works. I mean, generally, we have a stable of solutions, because, I think, when I'm looking at this industry, there's different fits for different customers, based on how much complexity they can handle based on, existing investment and things like that, and where their technology is.
No, thank you. I know Chris West, who's on the call, will be a bit familiar with our configuration, but
Yeah.
I'll internally kind of reach out, see what's
Yeah.
interested is, and reach back out to you guys.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go to the next slide, but I can just verbally say it without going to the next slide. Thanks a lot, everyone. Um, hopefully you know where we are, and I will make myself available to, anyone who has questions. You know what? We want to be partners. We want to be consultative with you. We want to share our knowledge and, really have conversations both ways. So feel free to reach out and we can have sessions when it works out into your schedule.